Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. This week I have a very special guest that I'm super excited to hear from, and all of his advice today is Nelson Jordan. Hi Nelson, thanks for joining me.
Thank you very much, really appreciate it.
Yeah. So Nelson, as you can hear, lives in the UK. He is someone that I have met online, and we've had some great conversations around podcasting and online business, which is why I'm excited that he's here today. He is the host of the Working From Home podcast and a content strategist and creator for SaaS companies. So he has a lot of really cool insight into the world of online business and podcasting. So Nelson, do you want to start off with just sort of introducing sharing a little bit about your background and how you got into working remotely?
Yeah, definitely. So I've been involved in digital marketing under various guises for 10, 11 years now. I started off in paid social, had the opportunity to move into PPC and SEO, and finally conversion rate optimization. And content was something that just was throughout all of those, especially with kind of SEO and with writing Facebook ads. I kind of got a pretty good grasp of where copy and different pieces of content really fit into the marketing channel. In terms of how I became remote, I was working for an agency and in Birmingham in the UK. And I just decided that, my girlfriend at the time is now my wife, thankfully. We decided that we were looking for something different, and that maybe other countries had better things to offer in terms of lifestyle. So we decided to move abroad. We settled on Valencia in Spain eventually. A few other countries and cities and things were in the mix. And my agency at the time were just very gracious, and they essentially let me move abroad, and I carried on working for them. And I just had to fly back every month to kind of fit all of my meetings in a couple of days period, and then flew back out again. After kind of a year of doing that, though, I felt like the travel was getting a bit much. I actually wasn't spending enough time enjoying the famous Spanish lifestyle and sun and tapas as I wanted to be. So I made the decision to go freelance. And again, the agency were incredibly supportive. I'd been with them for 4 years, and actually they became my first client. So I worked with them for a few months after I went freelance, and gradually kind of brought on more clients. My first kind of clients were within Facebook and Instagram, and I've built out a small agency managing paid ads. But these days, actually, primarily what I focus on is content strategy.
So yeah, you do a lot. Actually, I didn't realize that you spent so much time in Spain. And Valencia is actually the only city in Spain I've been to. So I do know a little bit about it, and I do love it. So that's cool that you got to spend some time there. As far as, okay, so there's a lot to dive into here. So you do content marketing and content strategy for businesses mainly, would you say?
Yeah, so all of the work that I do is primarily within SaaS and e-commerce businesses. SaaS is a great market for content marketers like myself to operate in, really because it exposes you to a lot of people in terms of you can create really helpful guides and articles at kind of really top of the funnel, very broad subjects. The other reason that content marketing is so useful for like an industry like SaaS is because paid marketing efforts in those industries are so expensive. It costs so much to win, to acquire a new customer by paid traffic. So like customer acquisition costs are through the roof for these things. So actually anything that does work out cheaper and also scales a little bit better, SaaS companies are normally quite interested in hearing about that.
Yeah. So like when it comes to content marketing strategies, what are the things that people really need to look at? Because like you said, paid advertising in certain industries and niches is even the cost per click, or like the cost to do it is so high.
Mm.
What are some of the other ways that you think people can think about content marketing differently?
Sure. So it really is one of those kind of how long is a piece of string sort of questions. So I'll try and dissect it a little bit
Okay.
and to talk about like the different considerations and factors that play into it, if that's okay.
Mhm.
So the number one thing is like how much time and resource do you actually have to commit to this? Because content marketing is something that you really can't kind of go into and kind of dip your toe in the water. You can try out different strategies like that within content marketing, but it really does take a commitment and like actual resource set aside to do that. So one of the things I would say is like if you're not prepared to commit 6 months minimum to content marketing without seeing much change, like if you work with decent people with strategies and have done this thing before, you'll see results within that, but you should be prepared not to see any results within 6 months. It's because getting an efficient content marketing process takes a long time. You have to experiment with a few different topics and a few different channels for kind of distributing that content. And also, if you're talking in terms of organic search, then we're a little bit reliant on Google and other search engines in terms of ranking that content. They don't typically rank content straight away. It normally takes a little while, and that depends on your domain authority, which is basically the strength of your website, how authoritative you are in the space, how many other people are linking to your site.
Talking a lot of SEO right now. Like, yes, I've been there, looked into it, done the
Yeah,
things. It's a
yes.
lot.
So there's lots of different parts of content marketing, right? There's the SEO side, which is how do we create the right type of content to rank for specific terms that are relevant. And this is kind of where we have this top of the funnel, middle of the funnel, bottom of the funnel kind of considerations. So there's different ways you can go about it depending on when you need to see results and what sort of resources you have at your disposal. So the top of the funnel, as you can kind of imagine, that's where the biggest kind of audience is, because there's all of these different topics that you could talk about. So if we take a particular example, like meeting software, like we're conducting this over Zoom, right? So let's take Zoom. So there's lots of different people and types of people and different job roles that use Zoom. Obviously, there's like the family and friends catching up aspect. There's the like teachers now conducting a lot of their lessons online. There's businesses in terms of internally, there's business in terms of like running sales calls and onboarding. So theoretically, you could create topics on pieces of content, I should say, around all of those topics. And a lot of those would, subjects like, let's think of a particular example, like for the onboarding subject, if you wrote like an article like the 5 best ways to ensure like a successful onboarding process, for example, that would be very much kind of like top of the funnel content. Whereas something like how to pick the best video conferencing tool, for example, is more kind of middle/bottom of the funnel content. So that's kind of how you would think about the ranking elements, but there's also a couple of other parts of content marketing depending on how you split this, and everybody has different frameworks, right? So you have content that you create specifically to attract backlinks, so to improve the domain authority of your site overall. So like types of content that are great for this are things like your own stats. If you're in the position where you can survey your customers and put out kind of your own bespoke data, you'll find that people want to link to that because they want to find stats for whatever they're writing, right? Like something like that is great for like journalists to link to, other publishers to link to. So you've got that sort of content that will attract backlinks. And then you've got this, I don't think this is the perfect word for it, but it's kind of the word that a lot of people will resonate with. You've got viral content as well. So this is content that's really just designed to get shares on social media, to get your name out there, to attract a bit of a buzz. And really, content marketing as a whole, you need to think about how all of these different things play together. Some of them are overlapping, some of them kind of sit on their own. When you create a piece, it doesn't need to, and it probably won't hit all three of those. You're probably hitting one properly and maybe kind of touching on some of the others.
So within content marketing, we know there's like a lot of different things you can do. There's video, there's audio, there's blog posts, there's all sorts of stuff. But specifically going into podcasts, because I know you have a podcast. And so you can talk about your podcast a little bit, but I'm also interested to see what you think where podcast lies in the whole content marketing like strategy for companies as well.
Cool. Well, I'm going to address that second question first,
Yes.
because I think it leads on nicely from the previous. The way I think about podcasts is they're just this incredible tool that you can almost use to fill the rest of your content marketing funnel, because you can take the audio elements, you can take the visual elements and turn them into so much else. So from this interview, it's 25 minutes, 30 minutes long, right? So what you could do is release the podcast to like a podcast player, which then disseminates it to all of the other specific podcast platforms like iTunes and Google Podcasts, Google Play, or whatever it's called, Spotify, those sort of things. So that's one media type. You can then upload the whole thing to YouTube, for example. You can then split the video into the subtopics. So like the little questions, 2 to 3, maybe to 5 to 10 minute pieces, and then upload those separately to YouTube about, with a title, centered around that particular topic, for example. You can then split the podcast, the YouTube element into 5 or 6, 30-second to 1 minute videos for social, and put them through a tool like Veed or Descript or something like that to generate subtitles. And then that's your social media done for the week, right? You can then take that episode, transcribe it, put it on your website, and then you'll generate some SEO benefits. You then reach out to the guest, and then tell them that you've done all of this, and attract a link from their website, and you also feed their social media channels as well with this material. So pretty soon, like, you've done one thing, and because of the nature of the mediums, because you've got that audio element, because you've got the visual element, pretty soon that forms like the bedrock and the foundation of everything else you're doing. Whereas a lot of other people are approaching content marketing from this everything we do has to be written sort of thing. So they're basically just trying to get ranked in Google for certain search terms. They're not thinking of content marketing as this holistic kind of entity. And the moment you do that, you start to see like where the points of leverage are. And like interviews like this, creating your own material, your own kind of solo videos. Again, like, you do a video that can turn into a podcast, you do a podcast that can turn into a video, that can go into social media, that can go on your website, take the main points, break them down from the show notes, and turn that into a presentation or a slideshare or an infographic of the main points that you've covered.
When did you start seeing the power of podcasts?
So to be honest, it's something that I've observed for the last couple of years for other people. There's a difference between kind of knowing that something works and kind of seeing it, and then actually realizing that you could do it. There's the two very different stages. So things like YouTube in particular, podcast, I've been watching what a lot of creators have been doing for a good few years. In reality, the working from home podcast only got started kind of late last year. So we've been doing it for 3 or 4 months. There's a lot of episodes that we've recorded like in batches that are going to be coming out over the next few months that are already done, for example. So yeah, it was really hitting home once I tried it, in terms of how easily I felt that I could then make connections. So I found like once I started doing it, like I was getting loads of copywriters, loads of content marketers that previously I'd have found quite hard to access. People in the industry that had really interesting stories to tell, were kind of on the way up or already very successful. I just found like as soon as I started talking about a podcast, everyone's ears just pricked up. And it's great from their perspective because they can just pop on, give an hour of their time, and know that because I've got this professional process lined up, we've got an audio and visual editor for it. We've got somebody handling the social media side and breaking the content up into all the chunks that I talked about before. I'm basically doing their marketing for them. All they have to do is come on and talk about something that they don't even have to research. I interview entrepreneurs, online business owners, freelancers, kind of remote workers of any description, really, as long as they've got an interesting story to tell, or if they're an expert in a particular field that can help those other people. They don't have to research it. They come on, they talk about something that they love talking about and probably would be talking about it anyway. The difference is we just record it and then I do the rest.
One thing I have noticed that you kind of mentioned was like, podcast is a low barrier for people. So I don't have a podcast yet. I might have one someday. I mainly just focus on my YouTube channel, but I find that when I talk to people or invite them on, there is a little hesitation about the whole video aspect and being on YouTube, which is ironic because a lot of people with podcasts also record video at the same time and still post it online as video. But there's something about inviting people onto a podcast that the audio aspect, I feel like, is a very low barrier for them. I don't know if you've had similar experiences, but I'm finding people being really hesitant to do like a YouTube interview.
That's interesting. I've never had anybody out of the maybe like 30 people that I've interviewed so far. I've never had anybody kind of query the visual element, and it might be just in the difference of approach. In terms of, I very much approach the conversation as, obviously we're recording a podcast, we're going to be recording this as well because we'll put it on YouTube afterwards. And that's a slightly different ask of somebody versus I'd like you to come on and do this video interview. Like, I'm not sure why it is different, like in terms of like actually looking at it analytically, but like in my gut, I think there's a slight difference there. But yeah, no, I haven't come across that at all.
Yeah, it's just something that I find interesting, especially because I do work with a lot of podcasters and a lot of them do record the video at the same time. But I think you're right. It's the way and like you're being approached. You're like, oh, you just recording for a podcast, just kind of have to happen to show up, right? On Zoom or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
So another question about your podcast is you decided to call it Working from Home. And like, can you just talk about your decision and that process? Because obviously that doesn't really have anything to do with like content marketing directly. So why did you decide to take that angle with your show?
So I've been thinking of like podcasts as a medium for a while. Like personally, there are like 2 or 3, well, the number is growing, of podcasts that I listen to pretty religiously. The thing is, like, even though I consider myself, fairly kind of comprehensive within my craft, I don't want to label myself an expert because I find that kind of icky, but I know what I'm doing within marketing. But I didn't want to release another marketing podcast because, to be honest, I don't want to listen to any marketing podcasts. So it wouldn't interest me. And like, podcast is very much like a passion-led thing. It's led to a lot of great relationships. It's led to a lot of great business contracts. Like, it has brought in more than enough revenue to cover everything that I'm spending on it. So it has worked from that, but I wouldn't advise people to start a podcast to make money. I just don't think it's the most efficient way of doing it. But in terms of like something that you really enjoy talking about and you love meeting new people, that's why I do it, because I get to talk to like gives me an excuse to talk to incredibly interesting people, right? I don't ever have to feel awkward about like reaching out. It gives me a reason to do so. In terms of why I chose kind of this topic of working from home, it was something that I felt I knew stuff about, and that you didn't necessarily need to be like an expert in it at all, because you're just talking to people. Like that's the format my podcast takes. It's interviews with people where they talk about, you know, their experiences of working from home. I talk about mine. We kind of bounce off each other in terms of like different experiences and stuff like that, and how I dealt with stuff and how they dealt with things. And the idea is we just provide each week kind of a different frame of reference that people can use to go, you know, okay, maybe this applies to me, and maybe the next week something doesn't apply to them, but it's still an interesting story. Like I'm not going after a particular kind of type of story or type of person every week. You know, like I've had people on that are writers. I've had, you know, like people that are nutrition experts and fitness experts and productivity. You know, they're all kind of doing different things. I've had people that have chosen to work from home, and I've had people that have very much been forced into that situation by circumstances, or by being furloughed, or through quarantine and things like that. I just felt like I wanted to talk about that. I felt like the fact that we are all working from home, and this is a conversation-based medium, is incredibly important, because it stops us all becoming hermits. So
have you, from your guests, or since you started the podcast and talking more about just working from home, have you had any like big takeaways or anything you've changed in your like routine based on like what someone else said?
Sure. There's been a few things that I've tried out, and some of them have stuck and some of them hasn't. And I think that's totally okay. We shouldn't be expecting the same things to be working for the same people. So like one of those is like morning journaling. So a lot of people have recommended it. Kind of writing out how you feel in the morning, and kind of summarizing at the end of the day. Now, I've been able to do that sometimes with my business, in terms of it's very much like an embellished to-do list, but kind of in reverse. It's like, oh, I did this and I did this, to kind of remind myself where I am and that I did actually accomplish stuff. What I haven't been able to do is this regular morning, evening summary. How do I feel? What do I want to achieve for the day? I tried it. It just wasn't me. You know, there's other things that I've adopted, like yoga in the mornings, and taking some time for myself before I start. And whatever I spend that time on in the morning is my time. And that, you know, I'm incredibly privileged to be able to do that, because I work for myself. And I could just bump everything a couple hours down the road. Like yoga is something that I had a really bad neck injury when I was younger, when I was in my early 20s. I did it then, and I stopped doing it. I shouldn't have stopped. That's something that I've picked up through the podcast, through recommendations from people. And yeah, I'm kind of enjoying it now, and managing to keep to it as well on the weekdays. Books is another big thing. Like everyone has their recommendations, whether they mention it on the podcast or in the calls before or afterwards. Courses, people you should follow, people you should look at, people just saying like, oh, I think you'd really like this. That happens a lot.
Yeah. Morning routines is something that I haven't figured out. How what works for me so that I can actually keep it. I try stuff.
That's the most important thing, right?
Yeah.
Something that works for you that you can keep doing consistently. That's definitely the most important thing.
Well, awesome. This has been super fun and enlightening. You've provided a lot of information. Is there any final words of wisdom or anything that you didn't get to share that you want to share?
No, I'd just say, yeah, if you work from home yourself, or you're just interested in hearing other people's stories, again, I get a wide range of people on the podcast. Yeah, just give the Working from Home podcast a listen and let me know what you think. Always eager to get feedback.
Yeah, and I will put a link to the podcast down in the description, so it can be easily found. Well, awesome. Thanks so much for spending time with me today. I really appreciate it. And for all of you out there, if you have any feedback or any questions, leave a comment below. And thanks for being here, you guys. And I will see you next week.